The ever stalwart Guard are on the way soon with an imminent release of the Deathcore box this Saturday, and so is tradition. We are getting a set of teasers and previews this week for the upcoming codex, and today we got to see 2 of the detachments coming with the book. There is going to be 6 in total, it seems: the Index Combined Arms Force, the Grotmus detachment, and then 4 new ones. But what we got to see today were the Siege Regiment, which is focused all around infantry and supporting them with long-range firepower, and then also the Recon Element detachment, which is all about stealth and camouflage. Now, the Siege Regiment comes with the rule of artillery support, and this is actually really fun. It doesn't specifically buff things like your basilisks, it just gives you a rule that kind of imitates the idea of this long distant artillery from way behind the battle lines shooting onto the battlefield. So the rule that it gives you is this really fun one that allows you to pick one of 3 abilities at the start of the battle round, and then that has an immediate impact on either your opponent or on your units. So you can choose Creeping Barrage, and that lets you roll a dice for each enemy unit that is over 12 inches away from any models in your army, and that is on the battlefield of course. And on a 5+, they have to subtract 2 inches from their movement and their advance and charge rolls. So it's on a 5+, it's not always going to go off on the unit that you really need it to, but in an average size game, this will almost certainly get at least 1 or 2 of the enemy's units massively slowed down. It's going to be a huge detriment to things like Death Guard and Necrons, who will just feel like snails on those units. But even some faster armies like Eldari or the Tyranids, they are really going to suffer with that much reduction to their movement. And I mean, if you're lucky enough to get this off on a key enemy unit that was hoping to move, advance, and still charge, like potentially Thunderwolves can, then that is a flat 6 inches less to their overall threat range. So it can be a seriously impressive debuff. You can't always rely on it going off, but even if you just get a couple of units a bit slowed down, that's going to make it harder for your opponent to screen stuff, to get where they need to be for secondaries, to get onto objectives. It is just a really nice debuff to be able to put onto a few enemy units. Otherwise, you can pick Incendiary Bombardment. This basically gets you ignores cover, so you can pick a number of enemy units, again over 12 inches away from any models in your army, and they get scattered. And what that means is that they can't benefit from cover. And the number you can pick, or the number of enemy units you can pick, that depends on the battle size. So it's 2 enemy units in an incursion game, 3 in a strike force, and 4 in an onslaught. So it's pretty good all round. It's incredibly helpful for your stronger weapons that do have that bit better AP, just for making sure they can actually punch through those armor saves a bit more reliably, and all the cover that is in the game at the moment isn't essentially negating a point of your armor penetration. It's just going to be a really solid all-rounder one to choose if you've got a few enemy units that are hiding in cover near objectives that you want to get rid of, or there is just a super scary enemy Death Star that is in cover and just waiting for the chance to strike. You can try and get rid of that, or at least start to deal some damage to it before it gets into position. The final option is Smoke Shells. This is your more defensive choice. Again, you can pick a number of units depending on the battle size, but this time units from your army, and then until the end of the battle round, they get stealth. So it's a great way to get some -1 to hit bonuses on some of your really important units. If you've got a few units that are holding a key objective, or some important tanks that you want to keep alive so they can keep chucking some firepower into the enemy, this is going to be a really good way to just have them hanging around that much longer. So all round, it's a good detachment, I think. It's very flexible, and at least in some respects, it's quite reliable. And what I really like about it is that it does play into the theme of this long-range artillery bombardment hitting the battlefield as the rest of your infantry moves up the board. We also got shown 3 strats from that detachment today, and Over the Top starts us off pretty strong. It is very costly at 2 command points, but what it means is that an officer from your army can issue the move order, and it can go onto any infantry regiment unit that are eligible to receive it. So there is no distance restrictions to this now. You can just give a huge swathe of your army some much better mobility by adding 3 inches to their movement. So yes, as I said, it is pricey, but it can be amazing to get a good chunk of your units up the board, onto objectives, to score some secondaries, or just away from an enemy that much more easily. Callous Sacrifice is cheaper at 1 command point. This one is done in your shooting phase. You pick a platoon unit in engagement range of an enemy, and it makes it so that enemy units aren't considered to be in engagement range of that unit for the purposes of shooting. So all of your other shooting in the army can be shot into those enemies, even if they are engaged with your unit. Now, this does come with a downside. If the enemy unit loses a wound, you have to roll a dice, and on a 4+, a model from your engaged unit is also destroyed. So you will absolutely kill a few of your own guys when you're doing this, but this is great if you've got an enemy unit tied up or they've charged into you to try and protect themselves from some shooting. You know, you can just throw a throwaway screen or a chaff unit into the enemy to tie them up and keep them locked down, and then still just light them up with all of your armies shooting. So for an army like the Guard, where you are going to have a few units that you don't really mind killing for the sake of killing an enemy unit, this is going to be very, very useful to have. The Minefield Stratagem is the last one we see for the Siege Regiment. This one allows a platoon unit at the start of the enemy charge phase to roll a dice whenever an enemy unit ends a charge move in engagement range of them, and on a 5+, that enemy unit takes a mortal wound. Now, it's only up to a maximum of 6, and only going off on a 5+, yes, this isn't the most reliable thing, but you can kind of think of it like a reverse grenades stratagem, and if a unit of, say, 20 orc boys charges into you, that will, on average rolling, get you that full 6 mortals into them, and just flat out kill 6 orc boys before the combat even begins. So it can be a really nasty surprise, and it can be quite a good charge deterrent. If the enemy only has, a few models left in the unit, they do run the risk of having them all die before they can even swing. And the big threat is that you can spike it really high. Like, you could potentially kill off a Terminator or 2 if a unit of 10 charges in. So it is quite a nice, cheap, yes, not really reliable, but quite threatening anti-chargeability that you can just add to your list of tricks. So I do think it is one that if you really need to defend an objective and you don't want the enemy anywhere near it, having it in your back pocket will at least be a bit of a deterrent. The other detachment we got to see was the Recon Element, who come with the Masters of Camouflage rule. This gives all Walker and Regiment models in your army the benefit of cover. So it's already a nice boost to your armor saves, but on top of that, if the model with this is getting cover from another source, so for example being inside some ruins, they get a further +1 to their save up to a maximum of a 3-up armor save. So turning something like your 5-up save Guardsman into 4-up saves base when they are just running around the board, but then getting to a 3-up save when they're sitting in cover does make quite a significant difference. It does add a lot of durability whether you are moving up the board or just hunkering down holding an objective. It's going to make things like your infantry units and your sentinels just that much more resilient to incoming fire. So it is another very strong, if more defensive focused detachment right here. The 3 strats we got shown for this detachment are all quite interesting. All the ones we've seen are done in your opponent's turn or phases, and Courageous Diversion is up first. This is at the start of the opponent's shooting phase. You can pick an infantry or mounted unit from your army, and they get a 6-up Feel No Pain for the phase against enemy shooting. But on top of that, if your unit is the closest eligible target to the enemy unit firing, they're also -1 to hit. So you can act as that sacrificial unit to the enemy fire and make it not only that much harder for them to deal with you by giving you a 6-up Feel No Pain, but also potentially being -1 to be hit, and of course getting that better armor save from the detachment rule, so you can make even your basic foot units really quite resilient with this stratagem. The Scramble Field stratagem is done at the start of the enemy reinforcement step. You get to pick an infantry unit from your army, and it essentially makes a 12-inch aura around them where the enemy can't set up their units as reinforcements. So this to me is an incredibly strong, very flexible and reliable deep strike denial trick, The fact that you can cater it to exactly where it needs to be right before the enemy is making their reinforcement moves is so strong, and you can use this to really easily and really effectively screen out and protect a valuable unit of yours from any enemies that you don't want too close to them. And then the final one, Scouting Outriders. This is done on a mounted or a walker unit, and it allows you at the end of the enemy turn to pick one of those units that is wholly within 10 inches of a battlefield edge and not in engagement range of an enemy, and they can be put into strategic reserves. So it's not quite as good as some other uppy-downy abilities, but it's still a fairly strong one, and it can definitely help you get a unit of Sentinels or Rough Riders onto the other end of the board really reliably and quickly, or just use it to get away from danger or go grab some secondary objectives or that kind of thing. So for 1 CP, it's another really, really useful tool to have in your back pocket. So we have 2 very cool, very unique, and to be honest, very fluffy detachments so far for the Guard. It does look as though the Astra Militarum are going to have quite a lot of tricks to play around with, and I personally love the idea of that World War I theme from the Siege Regiment, which I do think will fit in super, super well with the Death Corps of Krieg. But as always, what do you make of the rules we've seen so far? And also I'd love to know, what are you hoping to see from the other detachments? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below, and as always, thank you very much for watching. Please do like and subscribe for more Warhammer content from me, but until next time, I'll catch you later, guys.